Thank you, Phyllis. You took me off guard with that one. That one puts me all up in my feels. Woo! Good morning. My name is Joni Spain, and I'll be your service leader this morning. Welcome to Unity of Bloomington. At Unity, we offer practical spiritual teachings that empower abundant and meaningful living. We're a center for spiritual growth, and we provide inspiration, tools, and practices that support people on their path. We also extend a special welcome to those of you joining us online today. If you'd like to find out more about us or receive our newsletter, please visit our website at unityofbloomington.org. Now, please stand, and we'll combine our voices in joyful song. standing and join me in affirming our statement of being. Together, there is only one presence and one power in the universe, God the good, omnipotent. This power expresses life, love, wisdom, and abundance through me. In it I live and move and have my being. You may be seated. One way we empower abundant and meaningful living is by practicing and living our 5 basic principles. I'll state the principle and invite you to respond with the affirmation. God is absolute good, everywhere present. God is. We have a spark of divinity within us, the Christ Spirit within. Our very essence is of God, and therefore we are also inherently good. I am. We create our experience of life by the activity of our thinking. Everything in the manifest realm has its beginning in thought. Prayer is creative thinking that heightens the connection with God-mind and therefore brings forth wisdom, wholeness, prosperity, and everything good. Through thought, words, and action, we live in the truth we know. I live. And now it's time for a moment with our children, and I'm up. I was thinking this week about what we did last week. What did we do with our clocks? We set our clocks forward 1 hour. And we call that spring forward. It's a fun little mnemonic device. I think it's called a mnemonic device. Fall back in the fall, set our clocks back an hour in the fall. And in the spring, we move them forward an hour, spring forward. But I really started thinking about those words, spring forward. And I pictured a gymnast on the floor mat. And she springs forward over and over again. And I thought of the Kentucky Derby. And when the gates open, those horses spring forward. And I thought of a runner, a track meet, feet on the blocks, the starter gun goes off, and the runners spring forward. And that reminded me of focus, and it reminded me of health, and we're talking about health this month. It reminded me of practice and intention, and all of that sounded very good. Then I thought about nature. Where and when does nature spring forward? And I thought of dolphins and whales that breach out of the water, and that brought the word joy. And then I thought of flowers and leaves. They're a tight bud, and then all at once they spring forward, and it's beauty. Salmon, upstream, springing forward with, that's focus and intention. And then I thought of our 12 powers. And so many of Unity's 12 powers are right there in that phrase, spring forward. Strength, power, zeal, our favorite. So I thought, how do you want to spring forward? Sometimes we think of spring as spring forward, or setting our clocks forward. I kind of complain about it sometimes. It's kind of annoying. And then I thought, no, this is wonderful. It's a brand new start, and we're coming out of a dark winter that was challenging for a lot of people. And so we can spring forward with joy and zeal and health and strength and power. So all of you at home, turn to your mom and dad or your grandparents and tell them how you want to spring forward into this week or this month. And then send Ginger or send the church an email and tell us how you're going to spring forward. Okay, now we're going to spring forward into song.
Let your spirit shine, 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 shine. Let your spirit shine, 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 shine. Let your spirit shine, 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 shine. Children of the world, let your spirit shine. Children of the world, let your spirit shine. Children of the world, let
Our theme for March is health. This year, Unity's annual theme is Embrace Your Unlimited Good, and we're focusing on health this month. So our affirmation is, am I in the right place? Yeah. I embrace and cultivate my health. Ginger, do you have any announcements?
Not today. We're just very grateful to see you in person and grateful for all of you that are online, that are with us in spirit and virtually. And actually, next week, we have a whole bunch of announcements. So we're excited. We're springing forward into, a new beginning of Unity of Bloomington in 2022. So lots of interesting and fun things happening.
Thank you, Ginger. And now it's time for our daily word. The Daily Word is produced and printed by Unity. You can learn more about the Daily Word by visiting dailyword.com. The word for today is positivity, and our affirmation is, I plant seeds of positivity and harvest joy. And now I'll read an excerpt from today's Daily Word. Today I tend the garden of my consciousness. I pull the weeds of worrisome and unforgiving thoughts by denying they have any power over me. I create a fertile environment for new, positive thoughts to grow through regular prayer and meditation. Now we'll join together in speaking the affirmation aloud. Together, I plant seeds of positivity and harvest joy. And now repeat the affirmation to yourself silently. Our musical inspiration today is provided by Ginger and Phyllis.
I am a child of this universe. The ocean dances at my feet. The wind plays a melody through my hair. I am loved at every turn. I am kissed by Mother Earth. I am a child of this universe. The sun warms me in its embrace. The stars have aligned for me in the sky. I am held by all of life. I am loved by Father Time. Every blade of grass, every shaking leaf on a tree, every mountain top sings of the glory of God moving through me. I am a child of the universe. Through my breath, all of life breathes. I plant the seeds with my every dream. I can love at every turn. Give a kiss to Mother Earth. I am a child of this universe. I greet the God in each face. I am a channel of peace to flow. Oh, I honor all of life. Yes, I'm one with Father Time. Through every blade of grass, every shaking leaf on a tree, every mountain top
Thank you, Ginger and Phyllis. That was beautiful. Our speaker today needs no introduction to me, and he is a man who is not known as Reverend at home, Reverend John Spain.
Conventional wisdom has it for public speakers, whether preachers, teachers, politicians, or hosts of dinner parties, that the quickest way to lose the attention of your audience is to mention one of the three forbidden topics: your latest vacation, your grandchildren, or your dog. So with that in mind, let's start with a dog story. Toby the dog came to us in the summer of 2014, 2 years after we had moved to Santa Fe. Out of concern for his health and well-being and socialization, I took him to the dog park almost every day. It took us a while to find our spot in the daily cycle of the dog park life, but after visiting it various times a day, Toby the dog and I settled comfortably into a group of dogs and people who arrived around 9 o'clock in the morning and sometimes lingered until about noon. One day, the woman whose Weimaraner brought them to the dog park a few times a week shared a lament with us. Turns out, a friend of hers had just had a stroke. Aside from the fact that a close friend was stricken in this way, the focus of her lament was that this friend led the healthiest lifestyle that she knew. She exercised regularly, ate a carefully chosen diet, maintained her weight, and surrounded herself with supportive friends. And despite doing all the right things to support her health, this woman still had a stroke. The subtext of this lament seemed to be, what's the point if you do all the right things and still have a life-threatening illness? Is all this discipline and effort wasted? I finally learned that on those occasions when I can think of nothing to say, saying nothing is exactly the right thing. So I listened empathetically, and soon the conversation moved on. But the lament stayed with me, as did the question, is all this discipline and effort to live a healthy lifestyle worth anything at all, if in the end you end up with the illness that all this is supposed to prevent? Is it worth it? Well, eventually a few possible responses came to me. If the payoff for a healthy lifestyle is not to prevent all health challenges, what might they be? Well, first, for this woman, she survived a potentially life-threatening illness. Perhaps because of her conscientious lifestyle, she was so tuned into her body that she was able to recognize the first signs of an impending stroke. Perhaps her healthy lifestyle meant that she would not have a lengthy and difficult recovery. Or further, by being physically fit, she might recover with no long-term disabilities at all. Well, I never heard the rest of the story, so I don't know how well this woman did in her recovery, nor did I have a chance to share my thoughts with the Weimaraner's chauffeur. And by the way, the daily trips to the dog park that were intended to improve Toby the dog's socialization did in fact as much for me and my socialization during our time in Santa Fe. Well, as my thoughts on this month's topic of embracing our highest good and cultivating our health turn in a theological direction, I want to pause for a moment and talk about the Bible. I know that for some of you, the Bible and the way the Bible has been used is problematic. I want to acknowledge your discomfort and apologize in advance that the Bible has been used to cause you hurt. And I hope my words will not further compound your distress. But as I read and study the Bible, I am reminded of the many ways in which these ancient scriptures have been abused by those seeking to justify and rationalize such evils as racism, misogyny, patriarchy, homophobia, conquest, and the list seems almost endless. Yet, despite this troublesome history, I continue to find these same writings a deep well of wisdom, enlightenment, and inspiration. And what helps me to continue reading and studying these scriptures is that they are not just about people from a distant past and an ancient culture. They are about us today. As a species, we may have evolved in our technology, but our thoughts, our feelings, and our responses to life haven't changed much in the past few thousand years. Many passages in the Bible reflect a basic understanding of how life works. God blesses the righteous and punishes the wicked. Retribution theology, it's called in seminary. And many of us continue to live in this expectation today. For example, haven't you had the experience of waking up in the morning with a cough and a scratchy throat and thought to yourself, what did I do wrong? Am I not getting enough rest? Did I forget to take my vitamins? When I got caught in the rain, did I catch cold? When all our precautions fail, are we being punished? So when it seems that life is not an exchange of good deeds followed by an appropriate reward, then of course it's upsetting when we do all the right things and still suffer the consequences of failing or perhaps refusing to do what is right. In what Leonard Cohen described as that staggering account of the Sermon on the Mount that I don't pretend to understand at all, Jesus said, "Love your enemies, pray for those who persecute you, so that you may be children of your Father in heaven. For he makes the sun to rise on the evil and on the good, and sends rain on the righteous and the unrighteous." We're admonished to do the right thing because it is the right thing to do, not because it will benefit us in the moment. This is an example, one of many, where Jesus refutes that basic principle of retribution. Maybe we will never see the benefits of all our attempts at righteous living. Maybe like the woman from the dog park, we don't get what we expect from doing the right thing, and we overlook the benefits that do come to us when we do the right thing. Recently, newly reported cases of COVID-19 are dropping, along with hospitalizations, deaths from this latest coronavirus. Masking mandates are being lifted, and the discussion is shifting to getting back to normal. But hold on a minute. Is it too soon for this discussion? And more importantly, what do we mean by getting back to normal? And is getting back to normal even desirable? It would be a shame to endure all the loss, the disruption, and the divisiveness that the COVID-19 pandemic has visited on us. What a shame to endure all this only to relax and resume business as usual, and then wait to be surprised when the next pandemic occurs. You see, sometimes the hardest thing to accept is that the status quo can only produce more of the status quo. Business as usual and the normal that we are longing to get back to is what produced the conditions that led to this pandemic in the first place. One of the annual rituals associated with the Passover and Easter season is the airing of Cecil B. DeMille's 1956 film, The Ten Commandments. This epic film gives us a memorable but somewhat inaccurate description of the formative journey of the Hebrew people from slavery to freedom in a promised land. This journey from Egypt to the promised land can be seen as a foretelling of a conflict that still rages in the Middle East today. But it is more interesting, at least to me, to see it as a tale of our life's journey and the challenges and temptations that we each face. So while it is accurate in the grand sweep of the story, this film glosses over some interesting details that are found in the biblical account. Here's one example. You might recall that memorable scene where Charlton Heston as Moses stands before Yul Brynner as the Pharaoh Ramses I and declares in that theatrical voice of his, "Let my people go." But according to the biblical account, in his initial encounter with Pharaoh, Moses makes a much more modest request. He asks that he may be allowed to take his people a 3-day journey into the wilderness so that they could celebrate a festival to their God. Now, perhaps this was just a clever negotiating tactic. Start with a modest request, and if the Pharaoh is agreeable, then up the ante later in the negotiations. Or perhaps Moses knew that if he could get a 3-day head start, they could escape the Egyptian army and proceed to the promised land. Either way, it's interesting to me that at the center of this initial request was a religious festival. Of course, the Pharaoh refused. Perhaps he saw through the ruse of enslaved people attempting to escape for religious purposes. Or more interestingly, maybe the Pharaoh realized that if the people reconnected with their religious tradition and their spiritual practices, then they would be empowered to take the next steps of demanding their release from bondage. Later, the film presents a scene where Moses goes up the mountain to receive the law. When he comes down with the stone tablets after his 40-day sabbatical, the people had forsaken their God and were celebrating around a golden calf. Turns out this was just one of several accounts of the people becoming weary of the journey and turning away from God's promise to lead them to a land of milk and honey. At one point, for example, in the book of Numbers, the rabble among them had a strong craving, and the Israelites also wept again and said, "If only we had meat to eat. We remember the fish we used to eat in Egypt for nothing, the cucumbers, the melons, the leeks, the garlic, the onions. But now our strength is dried up. There is nothing at all but this manna from heaven." In this account, God responded by providing large flocks of quail to meet their need. Then later, just as they were about to cross the Jordan River and enter the promised land, all the congregation raised a loud cry, and the people wept that night. And all the Israelites complained against Moses and Aaron. "Would that we had died in the land of Egypt, or would that we had died in the wilderness. Why is God bringing us into this land to fall by the sword?" So they said to one another, "Let us choose a captain and go back to Egypt." What? After enduring this generations-long trek to the wilderness, they're ready to turn around and go back to being slaves to a ruthless tyrant? Yes, after all, they just wanted their lives to get back to normal. So if we sincerely don't want to go through these past years all over again, we must not get back to normal. We could instead concentrate on seeking a new normal for our personal choices, our individual lifestyles, our interactions with each other, our national priorities, the structure of our economy, our healthcare system, not to mention our relationship with the environment. Now, if that's not too long of a list of controversial topics to go into here, but these are some of the areas of reform and change that await us in a promised land. If we choose to continue on our personal and collective journeys to the promised land and seek a world that works for everyone, I think it is important to keep the values of our religious traditions at the center of this conversation. For Moses and the people, the journey to the promised land began with a religious festival and ended in a new land with new traditions, new laws and practices. And the core values of these new ways included these: valuing, honoring, praising, and worshiping God above all things. Valuing, honoring all others, not just our tribe and those who think and believe and act as we do. Caring about the welfare and circumstances of others, to include the widow, the orphan, the foreigner, the immigrant, the outsider, the nonconformist, the overlooked, and the forgotten ones in our midst. Being good stewards of the land and caring about all creatures, great and small. And finally, undertaking the duty to ensure that everyone lives in safety and dignity and shares in the bounty of the promised land. Achieving these lofty aspirations involves more than just crossing a Jordan River. It involves a generations-long journey through a wilderness of myriad changes, large and small. It unfortunately involves the passing of perhaps a generation or two of those of us who remain attached to business as usual in the old normal. And it involves immersing ourselves in the beliefs, values, and practices that sustain us when the promised land seems too far away, the challenge is too great, and our strength too small. So let us close by returning to this month's overarching theme of embracing your highest good and the affirmation, I embrace and cultivate my health. We'll do this during our time of meditation. So now we'll have our song of meditation.
In the silence, there is a sacred space, a secret meeting place. Love is there. In the silence, where every color blends and every rainbow ends, good is there. In the light, now I find that I know peace of mind. In the silence, my path is paved in gold, and all my dreams unfold. Love is there. Peace is there. Truth is there. God is
So if you would, find a comfortable position in your chair. Close your eyes if you're comfortable to do so. And take a deep breath. Hold it. And then release. And now another. I will read 3 passages. After each one, I'll pause for a brief time of silent contemplation. Reverend Linda Martella Witzlet, writing about an acquaintance named Jean who has a chronic health challenge, says, before rising from bed each day, Jean devotes a few minutes to spiritual and mental activation of will. Affirming, I will to be well, Jean chooses to anchor her attention on the principle of wholeness and well-being. She recognizes signs of divine life in her body and mind, appreciating that even with the physical limitations of her current circumstance, she is capable of living fully. In her book, The Grace in Letting Go, Peaceful Passing, Rebecca Wynne writes, "We as a society tend to place most value on things that are rare. Nature's harvest, though ever abundant, is seasonal by design. When strawberries were only available in summer for 4 weeks, they were much more highly valued than they are now that they are available year-round. It is the same with our lives. As long as we deny life's impermanence, we risk not fully savoring or appreciating it." And finally, physician, pilot, and podcaster Jonathan Sakier writes, "My 3 wishes for a healthier and happier 2022. First is easy. Let's ensure scientific research is funded properly so that new diagnostics, treatments, and preventive measures can be introduced to ease human suffering. Second, a wide understanding that global health access concerns us all. Health is more than the absence of disease, and to see people living in abject poverty, even in so-called developed countries, is a disgrace that we must solve. The third is that kindness makes 2 people feel better. So I wish for a kinder world where thoughts and deeds are all well-intentioned."
We turn now to the spiritual practice of generosity. We are grateful for the many ways in which this center supports us in our spiritual growth, and we in turn are happy to support the center with our monetary contributions and voluntary service. We're also grateful to those who have put in place automatic weekly, monthly, or quarterly giving. Today, if you feel led to give and are joining us online, visit our website at unityofbloomington.org and click the giving link. We also welcome your checks and contributions to Unity of Bloomington at our physical address, 4001 South Rogers Street, Bloomington, Indiana, 47401. As our greeters come forward to prepare for this morning's offering, please join me in speaking aloud our abundance affirmation. Together, I am an abundant being living in an abundant universe. God is the source of my supply. I am not dependent on people or situations for my good. God is the source of my supply. I always have something to give, and I consistently give it. I expect the best, I give my best, and I now attract the best in every experience.
It's deep down in
And now we bless our abundance with these words. Together, divine love flowing through me blesses and multiplies all that I have, all that I give, and all that I receive. So it is. I'd like to invite you to stand and join me in saying our closing prayer. Together, the light of God surrounds us. The love of God enfolds us. The power of God protects us. And the presence of God watches over us. Wherever we are, God is, and all is well. And in gratitude for our radiant health, we'll remain in place and sing together, Let There Be Peace on Earth.
Namaste. Have a wonderful week. Mwah, mwah.